Hi, everyone. All right, so I'm going to go through the August 2018. I know we did a lot of this in class, but let me just walk you through on the questions. All right, so for the first one, when you're solving for exponential equation and you're solving for x in the exponent, you're going to be using logs. So number one, you're going to isolate the base by dividing both sides by 87. Then you're going to take the ln of both sides because the base is e. And so by the power rule, the 0.3x brings to the front. And then 0.3x ln of e is just 1. So 0.3x equals ln of 5,918 divided by 87. You're going to divide both sides by 0.3 and you should get about 14.066. And some cool tips on the calculator. I'm just gonna remove the calculator for a second so you could see this. What you could do is set y1 equal to 87 e to the 0.3x and y2 to 5,918. And then you can change it to ask so that you can input the 4 choices and see which ones are relatively close to each other. As you can see, the last one, the 4th choice, is relatively close to each other. So that's the answer. Number 2, if you're dividing into 2 groups, this is a control experiment. And so here are the reasons why the other ones aren't. So an observational study is a type of study in which individuals are observed or certain outcomes are measured. There's no attempt is made to affect the outcome and no treatment is given. You're not dividing them into groups. A survey is a method of gathering information from a group of individuals by asking them questions. So again, you're not dividing them into groups. And the hottest wrong answer was systematic sample. So a systematic sample is a probability sampling method where researchers select members of the population at a regular interval. So like, for example, selecting every 15 person on a list of the population and just taking a sample from them. However, that's not what you're doing here. You just have 50 bean plants and you're just dividing them into 2 groups where one is getting natural light and the other is artificial light. So because you're controlling the situation, this is a control experiment. 3 had a lot of questions on this one. It's just, polynomials are terms when you add together, and the powers have to be integral lengths, and that means that they have to be whole numbers. Actually, you know what? I lied. They can't be negatives. They can't be negatives. They could be 0 and up. So I could say natural numbers, well, whole numbers. The second one, x squared plus 9 divided by x plus 3. I bet you a lot of you thought this divides into x, like it simplifies to x minus 3, and it doesn't, because x squared plus 9 is not factorable. It's actually a prime polynomial. And you know this because the parabola is shifted 9 units up, so it doesn't factor into anything. The second one, number 4. Okay, so the graph has 2 roots, real roots, because it has 2 intersection. And the p of x, if you graph it on the calculator, is a cubic function, and it has 3 real roots as well. Number 5, I had a lot of questions about this one. So you could do long division. Long division will always work. So here's just a little recap on long division. And you should get 2x to the 3rd power minus 4x squared minus x. The second one is synthetic division, and synthetic division, it's just really basically 2 steps. Set the divisor equal to 0 so that you know what to put in the corner, then put the coefficients, and then perform your bring it down, multiply them, and add. And when you get to the last position, you have 14. And so one of the things that we notice is that if this number is 14, right, that means that your remainder has to be 14, and this is the only one that has a remainder of 14. The first one has a remainder of 86. The second one doesn't have a remainder, and neither does the 4th one. Okay, I'm going to move on to g of x. So when you're finding the inverse of a function, these are the 4 steps that you're doing algebraically. You replace f of x with y. You're going to switch x and y, and you're going to solve for y, and then finally replace the y with g of x. Other things that you could do is put this into y1, and then y2 is X, and then Y3 is one of the choices, and whichever one is a mirror image of Y1 is your answer. 7, basically, when you're solving radical equations, you isolate the radical, but here it's already isolated. Then you square both sides, then you set it equal to 0, you factor, and then you always have to check your answer. Okay, that's like, so there's like 5 things that you have to do here. I don't have to do my check. You can just put in your calculator and just see if it works out. If you run out of time, I don't suggest this, but you could technically put this into the calculator and change your calculator into an ask function and plug all these values in and see which one works. Like this is if you're like desperate, but I'm not desperate, so I have the time to do it. All right, number 8. Remember that technique that we did in class where like we set this to M? I actually like that strategy, so I'm going to use it here because I think it makes our lives a little easier. So like M is like to the 1 year, the rate is 1.08. So 1 year is 12 months. And what they're asking is what's the base for 1 month? Like what's the rate value? And that happens to be 1.006434. And so when you substitute it in, you just have to remember to like put the 12 there. This one is really easy. Just remember to set it equal to 0. I overheard like one student was like, what's A? What's B? Like they did this whole thing and they couldn't figure out why. And it's like, please remember to set it equal to 0. Like you can't, because otherwise everybody's going to have different answers. That's really what it is. You need consistency. And once you know that the discriminant is negative, the only one that has an I value is choice 3 actually. So you can like stop right there. But if you finish the problem, you get choice 3. Okay. Depreciation is the subtraction. So you're starting with 75,000. So what's interesting is that A1, they asked for a recursive function. And remember, I said in class, recursive requires 2 answers. So right off the bat, like choice 3 and choice 1 are out because those are explicit. So if you forget this, just right there, like this needs 2 equations. Like I can't stress this enough. And then you're just down to either choice 2 or choice 4, but choice 2 doesn't make any sense because it doesn't require like the previous problem. And like that technically is a hidden explicit. So it has to be choice 4. 11, a lot of you expressed like you forgot trig. So you use our identity. You square the cosine and you're really finding what sine is, and sine is negative 24 over 25, but sine is negative in quadrant 4, and so my numbers are working out. And so tan is a quotient of sine and cosine, so you just replace it and it's negative 24 over 7. Technically, I was thinking about this, you can draw a triangle. The only thing is that it doesn't say that it has to be a unit circle, but it really doesn't matter. So I'm going to draw another strategy that we sort of learned in class. Draw your right triangle. And so maybe this might be a little easier. You're going to write theta. And in respect to theta, the first clue where it says 7 over 25. Well, you know that this is the adjacent, so that's going to be 7. And you know that this is a hypotenuse. So from that clue, this is going to be 25. By the Pythagorean theorem, you can kind of figure out that this piece down here is negative 24, right? Well, it's 24, but it's going to be negative because you're going down. So technically, the tangent function, the tangents of theta is opposite over adjacent. And the opposite length is your negative 24 over 7. So you can do it that way if that works out for you much better than what I did. I mean, mine requires a little bit more work, but that also works too. So what I like about this problem is that the bases are all the same. So a really quick, like, just change all of them into fractions. So 2/3 plus 5, 5 over 2 minus 1/2. And I just went on the calculator, just quickly plug them in. Listen, just use a calculator to save your time. You know, I don't want you to sit there to think about like, okay, how do I add fractions? Just do it on your calculator. I did have a couple of questions about this one. I thought this was the easiest. I'm not sure why we struggle with this question. So the summation notation formula is given to you. Maybe we didn't know that it was a geometric, and you know by just doing the ratio, And so when you do the ratio, it's 2.5. So the first term is 1. So it's 2. So then you just substitute it in and you should get choice 1. 14 really was 2 factoring skills that they wanted to test to see if you understood. Like, do you know how to do a GCF factoring of binomials, right? So we're going to factor out x to the 4th minus 16. Then we're going to do difference of 2 squares, and that factoring comes in the first term and the second term. And yeah, that's it. You know what you could have done? Test function. Set this equal to each one and see which one works. So I'm not going to show that here, but I think you guys can do that. This one, you know, technically what you could do is just type it in. Like, you could have actually changed your world into a plus bi and just type this all in your calculator. And your calculator will tell you that it's negative 19 minus 17i, but that requires you setting your calculator into a plus bi form. Or you can do what I did, which is multiply the binomials using the area model, simplify it, then distribute the negative and add them together. So 16 is a tricky one. This is like the get you moment, you know. Make sure to read your questions carefully. Regents love to do things like this, especially in the later problems. So this is 16. So 16 out of 24, they like to do that. Just remember that, you know, when you're graphing, it has to be y equals something. So spiral, change it to log, and it's actually a logarithmic equation. So whichever one matches a logarithmic equation is your answer. 17 is just a phase shift. So if you didn't know, what you could do is just test some things out in your calculator. But this is just translating C units to the left. This is translating C units to the right. This means C units up, and this means C units down. So the red function is actually going down and matching up to the star function by translating C units down. So the correct answer is choice 4. 18, look at that probability question that comes up, right? So you have to know that for an independent, I think it says independent, right? Does it say independent? Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is a given. So in a given question, you just have to do P of S given Algebra 2. So it's like the number of sophomores in Algebra 2, so that's 85, over the total number of Algebra 2 students, because this is a condition. And that's going to simplify to 17 over 59, but I think they have this answer, so that's that. All right, this is the moment where I was talking about this in class. So this is a really, I was so shocked that this is a 19 question, because usually multiple choice is not that tricky. What you do is you set them equal, and when you're solving for equations, so remember in class, if you don't, I'll just remind you. You want to combine the ln's to one side, and so if not everything is an ln, then you can't drop it. So, okay, if everything was an ln, then you would just set the ln's equal, and you can just drop the ln and set the arguments equal to each other. However, we have ln's on one side and a constant. So what you're going to do, the technique is to spiral out of there. I don't know if you remember that sprint where we did in class. So you would use the power rule so that you isolate the ln's. This is a quotient rule. So you divide the two arguments, and then you're going to spiral out of there so that you have it in e to the first power equals that argument. And then what you do is you technically have a fraction equal to a fraction. So you cross product, and it becomes a quadratic, okay, where a is 1, b is negative e, and c is negative 6e. So this is what I'm talking about. It actually becomes really crazy because e is an irrational number anyways. So when you substitute it in, you're going to get e squared plus 24e. And I did this in class, and my mistake was that I forgot the e in the second term. So just be careful, because there's actually 2 e's in 2 places. When you substitute it in, you're going to break them apart, and there are 2 answers, which is 5.62 and negative 2.90. If I were you, I probably would put this in the calculator just to check. And I'm just going to show this part because I don't know. I mean, I told you this, but I don't know if you remember me telling you this. So what I could do is I'm going to set 2 ln of x minus 1. And this is ln of x plus 6. And then I'm going to change it to an ask function. And I'm going to type in these things like alpha x e plus the square root of e squared plus 24e. So that's like what's great about changing it into an ask function. Look at that. Those numbers are like perfect. Oh my God. It also calculates a decimal value. So I highly recommend this. Like have your setup and then you just use your calculator to troubleshoot. And then E, the only thing is, for those of you who don't have the alpha function, you just have to be very careful with your parentheses. Yeah, I remember I had to do it too because I didn't have the calculator function, so I know the struggle. Oh, interesting. This one is an error. So that's why it's only one answer. Because you would have to reject this answer. And which is an extraneous solution. By the way, that's a pretty interesting question. I've never seen that question. Anyways, period. I graphed this so that you could see like what the pictures look like. So technically 3 and 4 are out because it's too many cycles. Like they only want one period from the intervals that they gave us. And the maximum has to be 1. So obviously it's either 1 and 3 or 1 and 2, and obviously 1 satisfy both conditions. But here's a shortcut. Y max means that the midline plus the absolute value of A is equal to 1. So if you quickly calculate the Y max, you're down to like 1 and 3, and you can see that in the picture that I did. And then the period is equal to 8. So that means that 2 pi divided by B is equal to 8. So that means B is equal to pi over 4. And choice 1 is the only one that has pi over 4 for their B value. Look at the GCF factoring technique coming up again. So they love to ask students this. GCF the first 2 terms, which is m squared, GCF the last 2 terms, which is 4, factor it out, GCF again the binomial, which is m minus 2, set both binomials equal to 0, and you're going to get an imaginary number because like I said, m squared plus 4 is a prime polynomial, so you're going to have imaginary numbers, imaginary roots, which is plus or minus 2i, and the first one is 2. This one, I drew the picture. I don't know if you needed the picture, but what I was trying to say is that when you go from the bottom to the top, it's only like a half of a period, right? You can see like this is a full period and this is only 1/2. So if the period is 90, then half of 90 is 45. But I drew a picture so that you can see it, like what it looks like, but it's not necessary for this problem. I always have to draw a picture of what this parabola looks like in order to find where the focus is. I know that the focus is always above the parabola where it concaves towards. So I figured out like the distance from the directress is 3. Okay, well then it must be also 3 units up. So 2 plus 3 is 5, right? And the last one, this one, I thought this one should have, like this question should have been number 19. I think 19 should have been the last question because it takes you a while to do, which is why I always, when I walk around and I see you struggling, just, skip it and come back. Like question 24 is an easy question. If it's independent, we know that the given, right? P of F given D is equal to P of F. Remember, like I said, if they're independent, right, doesn't matter what your condition is, the outcome will always equal the same thing. So it should be 0.8. There's no real calculation here. You just have to know statements. All right, so that's a wrap for the multiple choice. Let's go into the short response again. So this is a substitution factoring skill, but a hidden trinomial factoring skill. You can, if you want to, you can replace x squared with y and then factor it using trinomial. And then at the end, just remember to replace it back with x squared. Now, I don't know, but it's a subtle cue. It says over the set of integers. And the reason why they said that, because technically x squared minus 6 can be broken down again. It's actually x minus root 6 and x plus root 6. But root 6 is not an integer. So that's why what they're trying, like, it's a hidden message to students, like this is what they want. stop right there. Don't keep going. I mean, it's a 2-pointer, so it's not going to take long. I don't know why your copies was wrong. So maybe what I'll do is I'll attach the original copy and just make sure you guys have the original copy. But when you distribute this, right, 16 to the 1/4 is 2, and this is just 1. The 2's will cancel out, and then these two, the difference is going to be a half, and so it's radical x. But thank you for all those students who let me know. And I'm glad you caught that. So, all right. Average rate of change. So like I said in class, like they always ask you what average rate of change, but it could be like a trig function or an exponential function. So no biggie, you just have a calculator. At this point, I probably use the y equals function and substitute this in and plug in 8 and 4 so that I can quickly get these values. But like I said, give me the setup, like make sure you're showcasing your work on the Regents. Like this is the moment where nobody should question where these numbers came from. Like they know where they came from. And so make sure to round correctly. Don't lose. This is a 2-pointer. So if you round incorrectly, you've lost half your points here, which sucks because there is no partial credit. Yeah, so this one has 2 methods. So in class, we learn normal CDF and in terms of X and in terms of the Z. I just want to make note, like I didn't write E of X, but the correct notation is E of X. Not that you would get points off, but it's E of X is equal to the number times P, and the P happens to be about 0.78. So you get about 941 students. Oh, this is what we did in class today. Oh, that's cool. Moving on to 29. 29 is a rational equation. So honestly, I probably would combine these 3 fractions because they're all constant. So I start with subtracting a half, and this is 1. And then I was like, oh, that's perfect, because then I can change that to a 6 divided by 6. So that's x minus 6 over 6, cross product, and then find all of this. Now, I should go back and just check that this works out. So I'm actually going to quickly just verify my answer. You don't have to show the check, but I don't think I checked. And so on y equals, I'm going to write alpha x negative 3 over x plus 3. One thing to mention is that always do your undefined values first, because most likely those are the extraneous roots. And okay, so then this is alpha table. I'm going to put in 0. Okay, that worked. And that works too. Okay, perfect. So we're good. All right, because if it was negative 3, you would have to reject that. Okay, so I'm going to move on. You don't have to show your check. I can't stress this enough. Please don't put arrows because they have a domain here. So this is the midline. So I wrote the steps and how I thought of drawing it. That might make it a little easier for you guys. I first would identify the period so that I can identify the interval, which is pi over 4. That way I knew to go, okay, this is 1 pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, and so forth. And I stop until 8 pi over 4. And I made a mental note of that. Next, I draw the midline. The midline is y equals 2. Make sure that's a dashed line. It's not a solid line because it's not really there. You're just drawing it to help you plot points, essentially. And then over here, you're going to figure out your y max and y min, which is 5 and negative 1. And then you're going to plot using 0 max, 0 min, 0 max, 0 min. There is no phase shift, so we can just do that. Make sure your graph's in pencil and make sure that you're in radians. Moving on, when you're solving system algebraically, right, and you have a square and you have a circle and a linear, the best strategy is substitution. So what you're going to do is you're going to substitute the second equation into the first, the linear degree into the circle, because you're going to expand this and use your calculator to help you. That's going to be x squared minus 56x plus 784. Combine like terms, set it equal to 0, divided by 2, just so that your numbers are more friendly. Use your trinomial factoring, break it apart, and you get 2 answers, and then substitute it back to get 12, negative 16, and 16, negative 12. And it should make sense because it's a circle where the line hits it twice, it goes in and out. So it could have 1, 2, or no solution. So watch out for that. Okay. 32. I had a lot of students ask me about 32. So here's the solution. I'll spend the time now. Considering the middle 95% of the data, what is the marginal error? The marginal error is double of the standard deviation. So that's going to be 0.084. The marginal error is 0.08. In the given context, explain what this value means. So what it means is that if you do 0.35 minus the 0.084, you get about 27%. And if you find the upper percent, you get 43%. So 95% of the purchases are within 27% to 43%. So you're going to say the marginal error of 0.08 means that 27% to 43% of users are expected to make in-app purchases. So yeah, so a marginal error is like where could your error be? Like where is your true mean? Your true mean is between 27% and 43%. And what was the mean here? It was like the mean was 35%. Because we will never know what the true mean is. So we're trying to find it. All right. So a kid said, well, what if I don't get points for the matrices? When I showed you how to do the matrix, it wasn't to replace the work. It was to check your work. Like I've done so many competitions and contests and tests, and when you're in this moment, you're so tired, stressed. Like by the time you get to 33, you're going to be exhausted because it's going to be like an hour or two in. So I would recommend using the elimination method and then using your matrix to check that is correct, because I can guarantee you somewhere along the way, you might be making a calculation mistake. All right, so to do this, you pick a variable that you want to eliminate and bring it down to 2 variables. And then using your Algebra 1 skills, you're going to eliminate it again to get it down to 1 variable, and then you solve. Once you get it to 1, you're going to substitute this back into either equation 4 or 5, the newer equations that you created. And then you're going to sub both of these back into the original 3 equations and then get that x values. The last thing is to put them in an order pair from alphabetically ordered. And then you can use your matrix to check your work. If you run out of time and then this is all that you can set up, I'm pretty sure they do give you full credit for this, although I'm not too sure because this is a 4-point question. Just know how to use your matrix. So go ahead and check it on your calculator. Like, how do I do this matrix? Like, I've done so many of this in class. You should be able to do it. Also, you need to set this up, like all of this, like, right? A inverse B equals X, and then tell the audience, like, what was your A, matrix B? What did you get as an output? And then put it together as an order pair. Now that I'm looking at this, I think I messed up. I did mess up. Oh, look at that. You see? I just caught myself. It's actually 5, 3. That would have been a point deduction. Even I make mistakes. 5 and then 3 is why you better stay for the entire 3 hours, because every time you look over your work, you're gonna find something. All right. So here's what I did. I'm gonna go into like what I did. I looked at X's and I actually scanned all the coefficients and I picked the X because 2, 1, and 4 are their powers of 2. So I was like, I could do something with that. So I double the first one and add it to the third one. And then I quadruple the fourth one and add it to the third one. Because the third one's already negated. So I just use the other 2, and then you get equation 4 and 5. When I got to here, I guess I could add them together. I didn't have to divide by 7, but I did because I trained myself that I like to work with smaller numbers just so I don't have mistakes. But even as you saw, I made a mistake in copying the work over, so make sure you review your work. Yeah, I think you can figure it out from there. Okay, so this is the remainder theorem and the factor theorem. So you're going to substitute -1 into the machine because that's the first part. And that's 1 point. So that's your evidence. And then it says explain what your answer tells you. It tells us that the remainder is 0. Well, since the remainder is 0, then x plus 1 must be a factor. And this is by the factor theorem. So the first part is the remainder theorem, and the second part is a factor theorem. So it's a good idea to mention both theorems in your writing. It doesn't have to be too much. Don't write an essay. 2 sentences are good. Just make sure you mention the key ideas. For the zeros, what you have to do is you have to factor this quartic function. And you already know that one other factor is x plus 1, so you have to find the other factor. So we use a synthetic division. You can use long division, but I think synthetic division will be quicker. And once you have it, you have a cubic function. Well, the cubic function, fortunately for you, you can factor by GCF factoring. So look at that factor by grouping coming up again. So you have to know your factor by grouping. And then once you oh, look, dots over here again. You factor it and you replace it. And then you set every single factor equal to 0, and that's it. Make sure to go back and read your questions, because the hottest issue was a lot of students just factor and then just like left. No, go back and read the question. Did you answer the question? 35. I quickly read the question, and once I saw the word compound continuously, I automatically knew to use PERT. So we're going to use PERT. They said to double, so you can just say A is 2p. If you're comfortable with that, if not, then just write $10 and $20. That's fine. It doesn't matter. It's still going to come down to 2 equals e to the 0.0375t. Take the ln of both sides, divide by the decimal. You get 18.5 years, and that's it. And this one, 36. Everybody kept asking me what this is. Okay, so here's what it is, and this is the upcoming lessons. So the first part is really, you're just going to take the mean of the first part and the mean of the second part and subtract them. And then you're just going to write that that's what John did. John obtained the difference of the means of his experimental groups as 7 by calculating the mean of the classical, which is 82, and the mean of the RAP, which is 74.625, and the difference is 7.375, which is approximately 7. You will have to use, I mean, you can calculate them by hand, but I just put them in the calculator and then just use one bar stat. So now I want you to understand that you just took the difference of the mean. So the closer that the mean is equal to 0, the better it is, because it means there is no difference. But once there is a difference that exists, then we don't know how much of this affects the outcome, whatever the test is, right? So here, to determine if there's any significant in this value, John re-randomized the 16 scores into 2 groups of 8 and calculates the difference of the means and simulate this process 250 times as shown below. So you just watched a video about simulation. So on the Regents, they're not going to have you perform a simulation, but they're just going to tell you that they ran it, and you just have to understand what that means. So he does this test, right? And this is the outcomes that he has. So what do? You go ahead and you number the number line and you look at 7 and 8. Why? Because the difference was 7.375. So if you have a difference in 7 or more, then it's significant. And then that means that this test was significant. So we're going to say, well, 4 of this out of 250 is about 1.6%. So we're going to say, does the simulation support the theory that there may be a significant difference in quiz scores? Explain. Yes, the simulations support the theory that there may be a significant difference in quiz scores. There is 1.6% chance, which is less than 5%, of this difference occurring due to random chance. Thus, it is likely that the difference was due to the different types of music and was therefore significant. And the last question, which is a 6-pointer. I thought this was a really easy 6-pointer. It's not usually this easy, but you have to know profit is equal to revenue minus cost. And please remember to negate every single term. I can see from your paper when I check it, like most of your issue, the reason why you got the last one wrong is because you forgot to distribute the negative to every single term. When you do that, you're going to put on your calculator. I just put on my calculator and grab a table of values. And the reason why I want you to write the table of values, because these numbers are huge. So it's good so that you're not constantly going back to your calculator. You can just go back to your notes. And so when you recheck your work, you're not redoing things twice. So I just make sure your graph should fit the whole grid. It shouldn't be too squished, because the more narrower and squished up your graph looks like, the more points they're going to take off. It should be nicely spread out. And you should not have arrows, because they ask you to do it in domain of 2 to 16. And like that's it. Don't put arrows here. Yeah, so this is what it looks like. Just make sure to carefully plot these points. So that's the annoying part, but that's okay, because we're not going to deduct points if you're off by like a little bit. I think that's it from what I was looking at graphing. You're going to use this to figure out the next part, which is like the least profit and the most profit. I know why they asked this question, because this is a really good question. Like most businesses look at a trend and see like what year they made the most and what year did they not make the most and why. And they try to, of course, they're going to try to, because now you could see like their profit is going down. So how do you bring this up? Like, why was this the most profitable year and why was this the lowest? So anyways, but here that's not what they're asking. They're just asking like, what year was it the least profit, which is the 5th year, because it has the lowest amount, and that's what you're going to say. And what has the most, the 13th year, and because it has the highest outcome, and that's it. Make sure to have 2 to 3 sentences. I think I have 3 sentences here. So anytime it says explains, please make sure to write 2 to 3 sentences. All right, and that's it for now. So yeah, until next time. All right, we're gonna do July. No, not July. The next one, what is it? January 2019. All right, have fun, friends. Bye.